I actually wrote these all down because I was so amazed. Let's see if I can find this here. Following, Memento, Insomnia, The Prestige, Batman Begins, The Dark Knight Rises, Inception, Dunkirk, Tenet, Oppenheimer, and the film we're screening tonight, Interstellar. Please welcome Mr. Christopher Nolan. This is an insane treat having Chris here. I found myself nervous on the way here. You know, I don't even know where to begin. I guess my first question would be, how insanely is my career going right now? This is amazing. No, I'm kidding. We'll get to it. Yeah, we'll get to it. On paper, it would seem as if Marty Supreme and Interstellar have little in common, but I went back, I watched the first teaser trailer of Interstellar today. It was a very powerful Matthew McConaughey monologue in the trailer that's not in the film. He says, we've always defined ourselves by the ability to overcome the impossible. When we count these moments where we dare to aim higher, to break barriers, to reach for the stars, to make the unknown known, we count these moments as our proudest achievements. But we lost all that, and perhaps we've just forgotten. We're still pioneers, we've barely begun, and that our greatest accomplishments cannot be behind us because our destiny lies above us. Tell me about the recording process of that monologue for the trailer, and if Interstellar is as much a story about the limits of human ambition as it is a father-daughter story.
Wow, okay. The recording process of that monologue was always written for the trailer rather than in the film, but in the spirit of what the film was. And so we literally, took Matthew out to that cornfield and just recorded it as if we were shooting a shot. We just made it kind of part of the film, and just recorded him, got the sound guys to put the boom over and just did it as if it were a scene.
And no idea of ever having that in the movie explicitly for the trailer.
Always that was for the trailer, that was the idea. My brother and I talked a lot about the sort of sadness accompanying some of the later developments of the space program, the fact that the shuttle had been grounded, the fact that, in our lifetimes it had gone from being, a real focus of human endeavor. And when we were making this film, planning this film, it had really, we stopped looking outwards. I mean, since then there's been so much, particularly in the private sector, with rocketry and everything and space missions in this attempt. NASA's about to go back around the moon and ultimately get to Mars and things. So a lot of that, we're in a much more interesting place as far as space exploration is now than we were, 15 years ago or so when we were sort of talking about it. So we wanted to talk about that a little bit, about the greatness of human endeavor and how that collective, set of collective achievements that the space program represented, it had become very unfashionable. It was very unfashionable when we were making the film.
Interesting. Probably more than now, like you said, with all the private sector stuff that's going on, Blue Origin and SpaceX and all that.
Very much.
And so you mentioned your brother. My understanding is this was a script he wrote with or for Steven Spielberg before. Now, what inspired you in that original script, and where did you, not holes per se, but where did you feel there were areas you could improve on it? When I got the part, I Googled the project, and the original story was about a father and his son. So I thought, oh man, I made it, and then obviously they reworked it, and young Tom was a smaller part, but that's okay.
Never believe what you read online. The genesis of the story was the great physicist Kip Thorne and Linda Host had pitched the idea to Paramount and to Steven Spielberg, whose deal was the Paramount Agreement, which was part of Paramount at the time. About doing a science fiction film, looking out into the greater universe with hard science, with real science behind it. And obviously, Kip was providing that element of it. And right after we collaborated on Dark Knight, they hired my brother, we were shooting Dark Knight. He got the job and went to work for Steven. I get to call Steven, he's Mr. Spielberg. He went and worked on it for a lot of years, but a lot of it in traditional development mode multi-studio projects, which, it had incredible ideas and it moved through all of these different iterations, but it was sort of that thing of until something was ready, until Steven was ready to make it, whatever it is, and for whatever reason, it never quite got that momentum. And I think Steven went off to do a different film, so it became available. And I had a lot of conversations with Jonah over the years about what he was doing and what the ambition for it was. And I was super excited about it. I was always incredibly struck by his first act. It was just so amazing, such an amazing world. I've been working on, nobody would be surprised to know, I've been working on time travel ideas and things looking at time in particular way. And I had a couple of sort of half-baked projects that I hadn't quite committed to, that I was working on, back of the drawer kind of thing. And when it became available, I went to him and I said, how would you feel, because he'd written and rewritten and whatever, and I think, it was really a case of me saying, how would you feel if I took this and tried to combine it somewhere, or ideas kind of changed a bit what it was. He was fine with that because he could tell the spirit of what I was trying to do was get to what he'd initially been excited about. This incredible first act, this idea of not exactly a dystopia, but a sort of planet that's dying. The idea that inspired him at the beginning, his initial concept was, this idea of the Earth is the egg, and the egg hatches and we go out into the world. The Earth is the beginning of things for the human race, which is a really beautiful idea. It was that, and the other thing that was indelible from all his work was this moment where Kubo receives all these messages from the past. And that scene, I really wanted to find a way to make that scene work. So it was all about that for me.
Wow, somehow I didn't know that I would have guessed that the first act had your fingerprints all over it. I wouldn't guess that that was what excited you the most about it. Okay, here, I'm not usually in the question chair here.
It's way harder to ask.
Yeah, it really is, huh? I'm going to skip that one because I'm really curious about this next one. I really always want to ask you this, and you can dodge it if you don't want to answer it, but I have this theory that, McConaughey had either, I think he had already won the Oscar for Dallas Buyers Club, and you were coming off of Inception, Batman Begins, The Dark Knight Rises, and I remember reading the script for Interstellar in my trailer and thinking it was going to literally change the world, and that the sort of dystopia you just talked about in the beginning of the film and the environmental consequences of how we were living. I thought the film was tremendous on the page, and when I saw it, I was all the more blown away. Now, the reception was obviously hugely positive, and it was a box office success, it was a critical success, but do you think there was sort of after your enormous success in the 4 films I just outlined in Matthews, was there not could people not imagine at the time that you guys were going to deliver such I'm going to call it a masterpiece? Because I feel in the years since, even today, not that a New York Times best films list matters, but even you see the popularity of the film.
It matters if you're on it.
That's true. That's true. But at the time, I guess my question is, when I'm trying to frame it as...
You're trying to be polite.
Yeah.
And you're pointing to... The film was received in a slightly ambiguous way. It was a little bit sniffy. Some of the responses were a bit sniffy from critics, a little bit from audiences. It made money. It made very, very good money around the world, particularly. But yeah, there was a little sense of people not quite being. It sounds egotistical to say they weren't ready for it, or the world wasn't ready for it, something like that. But maybe they weren't ready for it from me. I had some very brave producer at some point had anonymously said of me, he's a cold guy who makes cold films, years before, and that had sort of stuck on me for several projects. Interstellar was a project, the reason I was attracted to my brother's first act is it was about family, it was about humanity, and it was deeply emotional, and that's the film I wanted to make. So it's a film that wears its heart on its sleeve, and I think that...
But that's why it kills me if you felt like you didn't feel that love right away, because this film makes me weep more than anything,
Well, but with everything, when you make a film on that scale, for me, when you show it to somebody who watches it, and every screening we did as we were finishing the film, and there'd be somebody who would just be in floods of tears and deeply moved by it. And that's enough. It doesn't, you can't also ask the culture to immediately embrace something. And, it's asking too much in a way. If you talk to individuals who connected with the film in a really profound way, then it's there. You've done your job and the film's there. And the rest is about the zeitgeist and where you fit in with that. And I've been really lucky with certain projects, and this is one in particular, where, it made its money and everybody was happy that it, got out there. And that's, when you make big films, that's just an incredible relief and a humbling thing. Like, great, we got away with it. But when the project then seems to touch people more and more and more year after year, and sort of grow, and so, I wrote for years, people recognise me somewhere and wanted to talk about Dark Knight for years and years, and then over the last 10 years, it's gradually just become Interstellar. That tends to be the film that people bring up. And that's just, it's a wonderful thing. I mean, we re-released it 2 years ago, without any real fanfare, just for our anniversary, 10th anniversary. And it made $5 million in America, in this screen and one in New York and a few other IMAX screens we put it on. It's amazing the success it's had. It's incredibly rewarding. Because one of the strange things about directing, being a writer-director, is you immerse yourself in a very obsessive way with a project. So, in a way, the worst response you ever get is when people are like, yeah, it's okay. Yeah, it was right, yeah, it's fine. You'd almost rather that they felt something, either passionately disliked it. We had quite a few people who passionately disliked it and stuff, or people who really passionately, obsessively kind of fall in love with it. I get that. I'm like that with other people's movies. I was like that with Ridley Scott's Blade Runner, for example. It is the same. I'm just obsessive about the film. When I was in my teens, I watched it again and again and again. It's wonderful to make a connection as a filmmaker with an audience like that. It's been incredibly rewarding to see it grow.
It makes you feel good, and it moves me, honestly, that you've felt that embrace. Because I felt it over the last 10 years too, and this movie struck me in my heart right out the gate. And I don't know if it's because I was so young working on it, just so young watching it, but it just moved me tremendously. Speaking of The Dark Knight, and I mentioned it a million times before too, but that really made me want to act. Heath Ledger's performance in that made me want to act. I was thinking about it on the drive here. It's so rare as a filmmaker to inspire a generation of filmmakers to pursue their dreams, but speaking for myself, a generation of actors too, with tremendous performances. One of which is Matthew in Interstellar. I think it's phenomenal. I think what he does in Dallas Buyers Club is phenomenal. But I almost find this, I don't want to say more impressive, but more challenging, because he's having to connect the dots of a universe that's not there. And he was in a great Paul Greengrass movie this year called The Lost Bus, and I find he used a similar skill there, where he's connecting the dots for an audience at the front of a bus that otherwise weren't there. Can you speak about working with Matthew, the casting process, and the casting decisions you're most proud of, whether in Interstellar or other films, small or large,
Well, I'm thrilled to be able to talk about it. It was honestly one of the most, there's a lot of casting decisions I'm proud of in my career, but putting Matthew in Interstellar was one of them, because he had not won the Oscar for Dallas Buyers Club. When we first cast him, True Detective hadn't yet come out yet. He was not. He'd be the first to tell you, he was not in the greatest place in his career.
But he might have been out.
Well, no, I saw my friend of mine produced mine. My friend Aaron Ryder produced it, and he asked me to take a look at an early cut of it. And because he was very proud of it, and, they were trying to figure out, whether it was finished or, everything. Jeff Nichols' film, Hunt, if you haven't seen it, it's an incredible film. And McConaughey was a revelation. I was like, wow, I had no idea. I'd always liked him, and just big, popcorn roles and a lot of great romantic comedies he's done and everything, but I just never seen him do what he did in the film. And so I followed it in the back of my head, and when we were looking for Cooper, it was like, we're trying to make a science fiction version of the right stuff, so we need our Chuck Yeager. And I said to my assistant at the time, George Goldberg, who's a very talented writer, I said, who's Chuck Yeager today? And he was like, McConaughey. we had two different studios involved in the project, and the people running the studios are not the same people running it now. But in both cases, they were very taken aback by the idea of Matthew doing it. It was not an easy sell at the time. And it worked so well for us because as soon as we cast him, the reconnaissance just took off. He was doing an HBO show at the time. It was like, oh, he's going to be an HBO show. What does that mean for his future career or whatever? But of course, it wasn't an HBO show. It was True Detective. The first season was incredible. So that hit Dallas Buyers Club, became this thing, and then he won the Oscar by the time the film came out. And the great part about that was the studio thought we were the smartest people in the world. We got incredibly lucky. I don't know, we connected at exactly the right time, and he connected with the part, really wanted to do it. Just turned up so ready to show what he could do, and what a phenomenal performance.
That part, I mean, it set a groundwork for the rest of my career, seeing how locked in not only you were, but how locked in he was on set. And I was talking to him today on the phone. He had a yoga mat on set sometimes. He was doing exercises and weird meditations between takes. But he was so fabulously locked in. He was so formative for me to see how seriously you both took the work. At such a, your work will only be taken as seriously as you take it and making it. And I was curious about that too, because you have that reputation now, and I find it very inspiring of being really intense in your work ethic. Was there a formative experience you had early on, whether it was with a crew member or a cast member, where you realized, there might be a certain irony to the way people approach experiences otherwise on sets, but I want to treat it in a sacred way? Did you have to make that calculation in your head, or was it always from the jump, from following, that you had that seriousness?
I think the reason that I've been able to make films in the way that I have is because to me it was always right from when I was making my own little 16mm films with friends and everything. For me it was always this focus on what's on that screen, what's the next shot that's going to follow it, how can I photograph that in the time we have, and it just, for me, it's always been such a natural part of the process to just let everything else fall away and concentrate on, are we moving forwards? Not are we having fun, not what time is lunch, but where I need to get to by 11 o'clock, where I need to get to by 1 o'clock, that. And that process has never changed for me. It's never varied, and it's a discipline sort of super useful. The thing that I learned as a very formative moment for me is when I was doing my first sort of budgeted film, which was Memento. Guy Pearce in that film had one particular moment. It was a very low budget film, relatively low budget. To me, it was enormous. It felt like doing Titanic or something. But I was shooting a very intense scene with Guy, and right as I was shooting close up, the financier of the film came to visit the set, and wound up standing right behind me, and we were running out of time, and we couldn't go into overtime, we couldn't afford it. Guy did an incredible take, but he's very in it, very emotional. I came up to him and I said, that's great. And he said, well, maybe. And I said, well, but you're happy. He goes, no. I said, I'm not happy. He was a little, I wouldn't say agitated, but he was in this mode. And I had that moment of like, okay, am I supposed to be efficient now, or am I supposed to be, what do I do? So I was like, all right, well, let's take another take, and I hope everything's okay. And he did this take that's extraordinary, next level. One of those transcendent moments of acting that you get not all the time, but every now and again on a movie, there's just that moment. And I was like, oh, okay, that's an important part of balance. And a lot of the time, a lot of the logistics, you can't ever let that completely get in the way of the human element and what the actors and the actors' sensitivity bring to it. And he talked a lot on the film. I tried to bring that to every film I've done since.
Okay, this was not a planned question, but based on that, you took my actor sensibility. Something I talked a lot about with Denis on Dune is on these massive films, like Apocalypse Now, Marlon Brando in that film, where he was famously challenging for Coppola, but he delivers this sort of out-of-bounds performance. And I think about Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight too, where I feel like Christian is maybe the best actor working and one of the most fantastic, but he's giving a more baseline performance for what's like Heath's guitar solo or something, And do you find with actors sometimes that you loosen the leash or something? That's a bad way of putting it, but where someone gets a different set of a little more bandwidth or something, or does that not make any sense?
It makes sense, but no, I don't indulge people like you doing crazy shit. I know the question underneath the question. It's best to deal with it now. No,
I'll be so honored to have an argument with you on set.
It's a serious question. But I'll give you an example. When you were filming the messages, from home, there was a particular thing that you were doing where you were hitting quite a dark tone in relation to Mirth and how Mirth had crashed the car. And it felt too much, and I didn't particularly like it. And I told you about it. And you just went ahead and did whatever the fuck you wanted and carried on doing it. But I was like, okay, he knows what he wants to do, he has an idea, and I followed it away. I'm like, it's about, as a director,
Wow, I didn't remember that. That's amazing. I thought you were going to use my name, man. This is unbelievable.
No, I might not have known your name, but I knew what you were doing. And I truly, it's like I remember very clearly, because I do remember realizing that it wasn't about being stubborn, it was about you had planned what you wanted to do, you planned your choices, and you didn't want to abandon that on a casual whim for me. You wanted to test that, challenge that, and see if I kept coming back and see it, which I did, because it's sort of accepted it. It's like, okay, I'll find a logic to that in the end of this week. I'll see what it was.
But you cut the case out.
And then I cut the case out. And no, it's yeah, okay. That was always the plan. But it's
an example. Person that watched that movie and he cuts the case and goes, what the fuck, where did that go, man?
No, but I actually, to be honest, the edge you were giving it is what Casey was putting into the later part of the performance. It's actually a nice link. I couldn't necessarily see that at the time because we hadn't done any of that stuff yet. And as a director, you are looking for an actor to interpret the script in their own way and bring their own point of view on it. And you have a point of view. It was very apparent even at the tender age of 17. You had a point of view. And it's not really about letting people off the leash or anything like that. It's about trying to give them what they need as a director. That's what you're looking for, trying to get the parameters. The main thing that I've learned over the years that I've talked to other directors about is acting is very misunderstood. It's very misunderstood by the crew very often, which is difficult because you're in a very intimate relationship between the actors and the crew. And as a director, you have to remind everybody, you have to create a space for somebody to be sensitive and emotionally vulnerable, because that's what we're asking you to do in that moment. And when there's a bunch of grown men in shorts scratching their arse around your hole, it can be difficult to maintain that openness. And there's an emotional volatility that can come with that as well, which is entirely logical and justified. You're asking people to experience or re-experience, sometimes even trauma. You have to be very mindful of that, and your job as a director is to make sure that everybody is paying as much attention as they need to that part of the process.
Okay, pivoting on a different note to Hans Zimmer, because I think the score in this film is one of his best, if not his best score ever. It's kind of a twofold question. Talk to me about the creative process of working with Hans on this score, and now you work with Ludwig Göransson on Oppenheimer. I don't know if he's doing the Odyssey, but and he's fabulous. The Sinner score he did this year is fabulous as well. What's so first part of the question, talk about Hans with Interstellar, but then what's the balance you find between working with collaborators you worked with before and a certain safety level or skill level that comes with that on films, and then also keeping it fresh and pushing yourself to find new collaborators, people to work with?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting balance, and Hans and I had worked for years before we did Interstellar together, and I had found that on every project I wanted to challenge him in a different way. That's what a great genius like Zimmer responds to. And so what I did on this film, and the story's been told a bunch of times, some people will probably know here, but it's completely true, which is I said to him, I made an arrangement with him. He was doing another film at the time, and I said, just call me out one day of your time. And this is before I wrote the script. And I said, I'm going to give you an envelope with a one-page, I call it a fable. It was what the story was going to be the film. It didn't say the genre. It was much more kind of primal element on that. I said, you're going to write for one day. At the end of the day, I'll come to your studio. You play me that. that's going to be the score for film. And he agreed to it because he loves a challenge. It's like, okay, you know, and it took me a long time to write exactly what I wanted, but I gave it to him. He took a day. I went down to the studio at the end of the day, and he played me, you know, the theme from Interstellar. And that guy listened to it 15,000 times as I was writing the script, and it evolved, and the recording process evolved with that. But that was the process. Now it's completely different how we did Dark Knight and Inception. It was finding a new way, and we developed an incredible way of working together, incredible ways of working together, and challenged each other in different ways on every project. But similarly, you know, working with Ludwig, I started working with Ludwig on Tenet, and you know, that was incredible. He worked in a very different way to us. But you know, at the same time, similarly, I mean, another genius. I mean, work with another genius, which is great, but a very different form of collaboration, different ways of working. So, in some senses, that's refreshing because it makes you think of different ways to work. I think I always try to do that anyway, you know, like challenge them in a different way. But it's a really fun part of things. And when you work with somebody at the top of their game, the way Hans was when he did the score, it's pretty wonderful to see that start coming together. He just, you know, he tortures himself on every project. He tortured himself on this project. You know, but he was so proud of it and pleased with it. And at the end of it, we got to do some like concerts. You know, we did one at the Albert Hall, and he conducted the orchestra himself. And it was kind of amongst the first times that was really done in that way. And it was an incredibly special thing. And because he had a similar emotional relationship with the work, I think, which is, I don't think it was fully appreciated on the musical side right as it came out. It's become more and more and more this kind of great, you know, milestone in story.
Unbelievably so now with anything that channels a space opera feel, whether it's a YouTube short or a visual album, that he laid the groundwork for it. I don't know if it's the organ or the synths or whatever it is, but they're telling me I gotta wrap up usually on the other side of this. So the last question I have, not to nakedly frame it in terms of Interstellar, but obviously the Odyssey is coming. We're all massively excited to see that. I don't know how much you can say about it, even though the book has existed for thousands of years now. But how did working, the best framing I could come up with, because you were also talking about the challenges of the film backstage, how did working on a film like Interstellar, the travel that required, or I guess a film like Inception to that matter, to that degree too, how did that prepare you for taking on something as enormous as the Odyssey?
Well, I think it prepared me adequately as I got through it, but only just. It was a very hard film to make, but hard in all the right ways. Normally when you say that the film's hard, it tends to point to, you know, creative tensions or things. It wasn't that. It's just a huge story and a huge thing to take on. But all of the work I'd done over the years, I had prepared myself, Emma, or other collaborators, always my, you know, who shot Interstellar, working, you know, in the IMAX format. You know, we worked in the IMAX format here as much as we could. The Odyssey is the first time we've ever been able to do the entire film to full screen, so it was another level up, and it was tough. And you know, you asked me about casting decisions earlier, and you know, casting Matt, who was the third time I worked with him, Interstellar being the first. Sorry, that's a spoiler for us. But the shoot would have been unthinkable without him. He's replaced his life experience, his career, and his incredible attitude, as well as his skill as an actor, to just pull everybody along, be such a partner. Vital casting decision, one of my best casting decisions. But I can't finish without explaining that I'm also very, very proud of my casting decision of having a young Timothée Chalamet in this film. Because you do an incredible job, an absolutely incredible job, and it makes me so proud to see things that you've gone through since. I mean, your career is, you're always challenging yourself, you're always doing something you haven't done before in a really interesting and new way. And it's always from a place of truth, which is all you can ask for from an actor. So, isn't it great?
What a dream getting to be here. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Out of curiosity, is there anyone here who hasn't seen this film, Interstellar, before? Wow, I'm jealous. What a treat you're in for. Thank you so much to Christopher Nolan. Go. Thank you so much.
We love you, Chris. We love you, bro.